Have you ever felt like you've failed so deeply that there's no way back? Like you've crossed an invisible line, and now all that's left is to live with the consequences. Sometimes, we make decisions that seemed right at the time, but later leave us with a bitter taste in our soul. Perhaps you abandoned a dream out of fear. Maybe you stayed silent when you should have spoken up. Maybe you trusted someone who betrayed you. Or perhaps you simply stopped fighting for yourself. Now, everything within you seems to echo the same phrase, "I've ruined everything." But what if I told you that this feeling of failure isn't the end of the line? What if I told you that God is still writing your story, even when everything around you feels like ruins? It's hard to believe that when we're in the midst of the rubble, when all we see are closed doors and missed opportunities. But the truth is, God never wrote perfect stories with perfect people. He's always used the broken ones, the ones who failed, the ones who fell, because it's on the ground that he finds the raw materials for new beginnings. Do you remember Moses? He killed a man. He ran away. He spent years hiding in the desert, far from everyone and everything. In the eyes of the world, he was finished. A murderer, a coward. But it was in that desert that God appeared to him in a burning bush and called him to free an entire nation. A man who had given up on himself was lifted by God to change the course of history. Maybe that's what you need to hear today. It's not too late. Even if you've made mistakes, even if you've failed, even if you've completely distanced yourself, God doesn't see you the way the world does. He doesn't define you by your mistakes. He sees you with eyes full of purpose. What you call the end, he calls a turning point. And I know, the pain of feeling like a failure doesn't just come from what happened, but from how you see yourself after that. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't deserve another chance. Someone who has wasted too much time, squandered too many blessings, and now has no credibility, even with themselves. But the word of God says, though the righteous fall 7 times, they will rise again. Do you know why? Because our victory doesn't depend on how many times we fall, but on the grace that lifts us every time we choose not to stay down. Have you ever thought about how many people admire you today, without even knowing the battles you've fought? Or how many others could be transformed by your testimony if you simply decided to rise and move forward? How many single mothers, failed entrepreneurs, frustrated young people, indebted fathers, people who've made huge mistakes, how many of them need to see someone like you say, "Yes, I failed, but God is still with me"? And why not you? What if today was the day to turn the page? What if all God is waiting for is a small decision from you, to not give up on yourself? You know that idea you shelved? That course you wanted to take but gave up on? That apology you never had the courage to make? That old plan that still burns in your heart? Maybe it's time to try again. With more maturity, with more faith, with more surrender. Because failure only has power over you when you stop. But when you choose to continue, even stumbling, failure turns into a stepping stone. And speaking of new beginnings, think of someone who failed badly, who was judged by the whole world, but refused to define himself by that. Steve Jobs. He was fired from his own company, humiliated, ridiculed. He could have hidden and given up. But he chose to start over. He returned, rebuilt everything, and revolutionized the tech world. And that was without even professing faith. Now, imagine what God could do with someone who, despite failing, chooses to place their life in his hands. Heaven is not in crisis because of your mistakes. Heaven has not given up on you. And neither should you give up. Perhaps what you need today is a simple yet powerful exercise. Write a letter to yourself. But don't fill it with guilt or shame. Fill it with hope. Reflect on the lessons your failures have taught you. Write down the possibilities that still lie ahead. And when you finish, read it aloud. Sometimes, the only voice that can truly convince you to keep going is your own, reminding you who you are in God. You are not late. You are not off course. You're simply at a part of the journey where the full view isn't yet visible. But God is guiding every step. And He hasn't brought you this far just to leave you stranded. So if the only thing you manage today is to breathe deeply and take one small step forward, that is already enough. Because heaven responds powerfully when someone chooses not to give up. And right this very moment, God is writing the next page of your story. Have you ever prayed with such intensity that it felt like your soul was being torn open, only to be met with silence? Have you cried into your pillow through sleepless nights, desperate for any sign that God was still with you? And what did you get in return? Silence. A silence so loud it felt crushing. Because the hardest part isn't always the suffering, it's feeling like you're suffering alone. That's the point where many people break. That's where they begin to believe, God has left me. But listen closely. His silence does not mean he is absent. More often than not, it's proof that he's working on something far greater than you can currently comprehend. It's in that silence that he ministers to parts of your soul beyond the reach of words. It's in that quiet space that he shapes and refines your faith. Because true faith doesn't shine brightest when everything is going well. True faith is found when you keep walking forward even when the voice of heaven falls silent. How many times have you asked, "Lord, increase my faith"? And then the storm arrived. The losses came. Doors were slammed shut. And alongside all that came the silence. Have you noticed how God often responds in ways we don't expect? Sometimes, what we call silence is actually God replying with actions, not words. He hasn't gone quiet because he abandoned you. He's gone quiet because he's building something. Think about it. Why did Jesus, though he was the Son of God, endure 40 days in the wilderness without a word from above? Why did he face temptation, hunger, and solitude, all in silence? Because even he needed to go through the silence to be ready for what was coming. The wilderness is not a place of punishment, it is a place of preparation. It's where we learn to trust not in the answers, but in his presence. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe your marriage is falling apart, and all you feel is coldness coming from the other side. Maybe you're battling addiction, trauma, or inner anguish no one else sees. You're pleading for help, but nothing changes. You're begging for healing, but the report still hasn't improved. You're crying out for direction, but everything remains dark. And the thought creeps in, is he still listening? Let me reassure you, he is. And more than that, he sees. Even if no one else knows what you're going through. Even if no one sees how hard you're trying. God sees. And he's in control. Have you ever watched a farmer work? When he plants a seed, he doesn't dig it up every day to check if it's growing. He waters it. He waits. He trusts in the unseen process. And one day, that seed breaks through the soil and blossoms. Now think, how many things has God already planted within you? How many internal transformations has he begun that are still growing beneath the surface? Just because you can't see anything yet doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means it's being prepared. And in this process, there is something vital to remember. Just because you don't hear God speaking right now doesn't erase everything he has already spoken before. Do you remember the promise he once made to you? Do you recall those moments when no one else could help, yet he was the one who upheld you? That same God who sustained you back then is still at work in your life now, shaping you, even if it feels like he's silent. Let this be your invitation, a challenge, if you will. For the next 7 days, whenever the silence begins to overwhelm you, speak these words aloud. God is preparing me. Say it even when your heart resists. Say it even if your mind questions it. Because your voice has the power to remind your thoughts that God doesn't need to be loud in order to be present. And if you need proof that silent seasons still carry purpose, look at the life of Oprah Winfrey. She was dismissed, abused, and disbelieved. She spent years surrounded by the quiet agony of pain and shame. But in that silence, she was not abandoned, she was being refined. Today, she stands as one of the most influential women in the world. And she herself has said it was in the silence, the waiting, and the suffering that she finally learned to hear what truly mattered. Now bring this home to your own life. What are you facing today that seems completely meaningless? What kind of pain is echoing so loudly that you've started to wonder if God has drifted too far from you? Can you allow yourself to believe that even in this uncertain, quiet place, he is still near? You don't need to feel something to believe it. Faith is not an emotion, it is certainty. It's walking forward without a visible path, trusting that God already knows the way. It's choosing to move even when you can't hear anything, believing he still speaks. It's keeping your eyes open when you can't see clearly, convinced that he still sees you. So pause for a moment. Breathe. You are not alone. You haven't been abandoned. Heaven isn't quiet because you've been rejected. It's quiet because something is being prepared for you. And when that time comes, you'll understand that every tear was watering a greater purpose. Every unanswered prayer was carefully stored. Every silent night was a whisper from above saying, "Trust me." You just need to carry on. Because today's silence will resound as tomorrow's testimony. And it will all be worth it. Every single second. Have you ever felt as though no one noticed you? Like life carried on for everyone else and somehow you were left behind. Maybe you've been putting on a brave face for others, while inside, you're carrying tears that no longer fit in your chest. Perhaps you're drifting through the days on autopilot, heart weary and crushed, with only one thought left. Would anyone even care if I vanished? Maybe that's the season you're in right now, feeling invisible, even to God. But I want you to listen closely to something that might change how you see it all. You are not on your own. Even if everything around you says otherwise. Even if the silence screams louder than hope. You are not forgotten. More than that, you are still part of God's plan. Often, we look at our lives and come to the conclusion that we're not enough. Not strong enough. Not spiritual enough. Not capable enough. And then we fall into the trap of comparison. We see people who seem to be thriving, smiling, successful, and we think, that will never happen for me. God must only work with special, extraordinary people. But that's a cruel lie whispered by pain when we're at our lowest. God doesn't seek out the most impressive. He calls those who are ready. He doesn't demand perfection. He empowers those who say yes. Do you really think David was the most obvious choice among his brothers? He wasn't even invited to the room when Samuel came looking for a king. And yet it was David that God pointed to. The youngest. The overlooked. The least likely. God delights in turning expectations upside down. He takes the rejected and makes them a pillar. He takes the dismissed and turns them into an example. He chooses you, with all your flaws, your scars, and your hesitations, and still says, I want to write something new through your life. And that is why you mustn't give up now. Because that part of your story you've been tempted to erase might be the very chapter that changes someone else's life. God gives pain a purpose. He takes the broken fragments and builds bridges, bridges that will lead others to hope. Your story matters. Your struggle holds meaning. Every step you take, no matter how unsteady, carries weight. Have you ever heard of Nick Vujicic? A man born without limbs. As a teenager, he reached a point where he considered ending his life, feeling like a burden, a mistake. Yet, it was through that very reality that God shaped him into a voice of hope for millions across the globe. Today, Nick shares messages of faith, endurance, and love with countless people, affirming with conviction that he wouldn't change a single thing about his life, because he understands that he was created with a divine purpose. His physical condition isn't something God worked around. It's the very means by which the miracle is revealed. And what if your story is no different? What if the very thing you believe disqualifies you is what God plans to use to reach others? Could it be that your pain is the language someone else needs to hear to feel understood, to feel seen? You don't need a microphone or a stage. You don't need thousands listening. Sometimes, all God needs is your willing heart saying, here I am. Maybe it's in the way you care for a family member. Maybe it's reaching out to a friend who is hurting even more than you. Maybe it's standing for truth in your workplace, even when everyone else chooses lies. Maybe it's simply getting out of bed today when everything inside you urges you to give up. That alone is an act of defiance against despair. That is faith lived out. That is already God working through you. Perhaps you look in the mirror and don't see someone qualified. Perhaps your past looms too heavily. You might whisper, I've made too many mistakes. I've gone too far. I'm beyond saving. But the scriptures are full of people who thought the same. Ordinary people. Broken people. Like Rahab, a woman once known for her shame, who became part of Jesus' family line. Like Paul, once a man who hunted down believers, who later became one of the most powerful messengers of the gospel. Like you. Try this. Take a piece of paper and write down every reason you believe God couldn't use you. Don't hold back. Then, next to each one, write how that exact thing could become a blessing in someone else's life. You'll begin to see that what you once labeled as shame, God sees as a tool. Stop hiding. Stop believing you're too insignificant. God is not waiting for a polished, perfected version of you. He is calling you as you are, wounded, doubting, scarred. Because real people touch real lives. And your honesty, your story, just as it is, has the power to be someone else's miracle. You've already endured so much. You've fought silent battles no one else saw. You've made it through nights filled with anxiety, thoughts that tried to undo you. You're not here by accident. And if God has brought you this far, He certainly hasn't finished with you yet. So keep going, even if it means carrying your pain. Even if no one sees the tears. Keep going, because God still moves through people like you, and is only getting started. Have you ever wondered why it hurts so much? Why some chapters of life feel more like battlegrounds than paths of peace? Have you ever looked up through tears and asked, what's the point of all this? Maybe your suffering isn't something you can touch, it lives in your heart. Maybe you're mourning someone who's gone. Or maybe you've had to bury a dream, a relationship, a hope that never came to pass. And that ache feels unrelenting. But here's what you might not have been told, or perhaps have forgotten. Your pain is not pointless. It holds purpose. It's shaping you for something far greater than what you can see now. Even if it feels like punishment or like you've been abandoned, God wastes nothing. He uses every tear, every failure, every restless night. And more than just using it, He transforms it. Because it's in those very moments where you feel undone that God is quietly building something new within you. David was chosen to be king while still a boy. But before the crown, there were giants to face, enemies to flee from, and caves where he wept alone. He knew rejection, betrayal, humiliation. The promise was real, but the journey toward it was painful. It was along a path of deep suffering that he composed some of the most heartfelt psalms found in the Bible, words that continue to comfort entire generations. That should remind you that God doesn't always remove the pain. At times, He allows it so that something precious can be formed within you. Things like maturity, compassion, empathy, resilience, and genuine faith. What if the struggle you're going through today is actually the very answer to someone else's prayer tomorrow? Have you ever thought that your pain might become a tool God will use to bring healing to others? Imagine this: someone, somewhere, may one day find comfort because you endured this season. Do you know Lauren Daigle? One of the most influential Christian singers of our time. Before her voice ever reached the world, she endured silence, rejection, and isolation. She became ill, her voice was affected, and record labels turned her away. Yet she didn't give up. She pressed on. In the midst of that pain, God ignited her voice to proclaim hope. Today, millions are touched by songs that were birthed out of affliction. Because it was in the darkness of her cave that God lit a flame within her. And what if that's exactly what's happening with you? What if the very thing breaking you down today is what will cause you to rise tomorrow? What if this is the shaping of your calling? You need to grasp this. It's not only about your journey. It's about the lives that will be touched because you endured and remained standing. It's about the message you'll carry, and the authority you'll have when you say, "I've been through it. I know what it means to ache, but I also know what it means to be healed." You don't need to wait for the perfect moment to take action. Perhaps the most spiritual thing you can do today is simply to get up. Brush your teeth. Eat something. Make a phone call. Let the tears come if they need to. But don't quit. The walk of faith isn't made of grand triumphs alone. It's also made of simple acts of perseverance. And every little step, no matter how small, is guiding you toward your purpose. You may feel like nothing is happening, but God is still writing your story. You may be on the floor, but you're still breathing. You may be out of strength, but heaven is holding you up. So hold on. This pain is producing something in you. It's pushing you forward. It's drawing you away from the surface and into deeper waters. And it's in the deep that miracles unfold. Have you ever been so worn out that you couldn't even pray? All you could manage was, "God, help me?" Then hear this. Those two words are more than enough to stir heaven. He doesn't need elaborate prayers. He responds to the brokenhearted. And if there's one thing pain accomplishes, it's breaking us open. It removes our masks. It shatters our certainties. It brings us to our knees. And that's where He meets us. He is the God of those who weep silently. The God of those who cry alone in the dark. The God of those who have no strength left, but still cling to faith. Here's something practical you can do. Grab a sheet of paper. Write down every single thing you've overcome. Every moment you thought you wouldn't make it, but did. Then read it aloud. It will remind you that you are far stronger than you believe. That your journey to this point hasn't been random. That you've already seen victory before, and you will again. Your pain carries purpose. One day, you'll look back, eyes filled with tears, and whisper, "Now I understand." Because what feels like a heavy burden today may become your most powerful testimony tomorrow. Don't give up. Not now. Not after everything you've already survived. You are being refined. And once this season is over, you won't be the same. You'll be stronger, more graceful, more like Jesus. And that will change the world. Now breathe. Just take a breath for a moment. Close your eyes, if you can, and feel the rhythm in your chest. Because in spite of all that has happened, despite the pain, the losses, the setbacks, the hurtful words, despite what still doesn't make sense, you are still here. And that alone is a miracle. Maybe no one has reminded you of this today, so allow me to say it clearly. You are strong. You are precious. You are needed. And this world simply wouldn't be the same without you in it. Just take a moment and remember everything you've made it through. The sleepless nights that felt endless. The prayers you whispered into the silence, hoping someone was listening. The mornings when simply getting out of bed took more courage than you knew you had. And even when no one noticed, you carried on. Even when you felt misunderstood, you remained steady. Even with tears falling, you kept fighting in silence. You held on, despite every fiber of your being wanting to give up. That's not weakness. That's real strength. That's faith in action. That's the evidence that God has never turned away from you, even when you feared he was nowhere to be found. How many times have you looked up to the sky and asked, "Why, Lord?" Maybe the answers didn't come the way you expected, but they came, subtly, quietly, in the strength that rose in you when you were at your weakest, in that hug you didn't see coming but needed so badly, in that song that played right when your heart was breaking, in the scripture that surfaced just when you felt like you couldn't take another step, in the soft signs that only a heart aching for comfort could recognize. You are not a mistake. You are not beyond hope. You are not forgotten. God knows your name. He's counted the very hairs on your head. He knows the fears you hide even from yourself. And still, he loves you, not with a love that flickers or fades, but one that holds on. A love that forgives, that embraces, that begins again. A love that takes the broken pieces and crafts them into something breathtaking. So please, don't give up. Not now. Not after everything you've survived. There are promises still waiting for you. There are paths you haven't walked yet. There are lives that will be touched because of your journey. You can't yet imagine the miracles that are still ahead of you. And one day, when you least expect it, you'll look back with tears in your eyes and a heart bursting with joy, and you'll whisper, "It was all worth it. Every bit of it." Because God never stopped writing your story. He was just taking his time with the most beautiful ending.